Okay,
Okay.
good.
The first person I met when I came was Warren Miller, and he was recruiting me, I think. I can still see him. He was really a larger than life figure. And I worked with him for several years as graduate students do on research projects. Then I was thinking about this today. At a certain point, I went down to work at the consortium. Both you and I went to the consortium. I think maybe I went there first. So when the center started, I actually believe I was in the city center building, and I don't think it made much difference in our life at all. It's just that I guess my memories of CPS really center a lot around Warren, who was a larger than life figure. And when he left about 1984, even though he came back summers for a while, I just don't think the place felt the same. And I just think my chief memories are centered around the people who were there, Angus and Don and Phil, and they were so important because we had so much respect for them. I guess that's chiefly. Oh, and then I worked for a long time for Jerry Clubb, who was in the consortium. I don't know whether you'll get to that part either, but he was a very memorable person to work for too.
I came to Ann Arbor in 1965. I hadn't really thought about graduate school until the man that I wrote my senior thesis for, and I had been working as a research assistant to George Gallup. Both suggested that I should come to Ann Arbor because they had just published this new book called The American Voter. And if I was interested in public opinion and elections and political behavior, Michigan was the place to do this. So I came to study political science. Because I applied to graduate school late, I didn't really have any financial aid, but Don got me a job as a coder over the summer with Kent Jennings. So I worked with Kent on his socialization study. For a long time, even after we were married, we thought that we were just passing through Ann Arbor, even when we had children in school. But, you know, of course, we never left. In 1968, Warren asked me if I would be interested in helping him with a contract he had with ABC News to help them with their election coverage. And so for several cycles into the late 70s, Warren and I would go to New York on Tuesdays to cover primaries and then, you know, to do election coverage. It's part of what got me interested in political communication and media coverage of elections, which became an enduring research interest of mine. So we've been in a lot of different locations. Santa started out in the hospital.
Yeah, yes, at the Catherine Street. Yes, that's right.
And when I came in the summer of 1965, what we think of as the main part of the building was under construction. I worked in the Argus building on William Street. And then we were temporarily in the city center building after Thompson Street opened. I think that was in 67 or 69. And then it wasn't really until the 70s that the center was formed. And of course, Warren had been this moving force, not only behind the what became ANES, and the political behavior program in the Survey Research Center then became the Center for Political Studies. And then his interest in promoting the election studies and getting them used was the genesis of the consortium, which started as a summer training program in how to conduct and analyze survey data, and then, expanded out way beyond that. And I suppose in one of the great dialectics of life, after Santa and I each had independently taught in the summer program as graduate students, and then for 2 summers at Essex, this past January, I became the interim director of the summer program, which I'm going to be doing for another year.
I should say, I forgot something kind of critical, which was that in 1984, Warren brought me out of the consortium and came to me and said, well, I want you to be my next staff director of the National Election Studies. So I did that for about 12 years. And I really got to know Warren then. He was quite masterful at managing the Board of Overseers of the Election Studies and putting together proposals and so on. And he really gathered around him an amazing group of very bright and capable people. That was his chief strength, I think, was recognizing talent.
Graduate student body was really divided in 2 parts. It was the people who spent their time in Haven Hall, mm-hmm. and the people who spent their time in the Survey Research Center and then the Center for Political Studies, working with investigators there. And there weren't many who spent as much time in CPS as Santa and I did, but there were people who spent a lot. And many of the people that we worked with, of course, are aging out of the profession now. But we worked with people like Tom Mann and Norm Ornstein, who became 2 of the greatest commentators on Washington politics. And there were several other people in American politics who studied in the Center for Political Studies. It really had a critical role in organizing the study of American politics, especially from the individual perspective, from the perspective of the individual voter. There were a lot of projects that got started that never really reached their full potential. There was a major study of representation in the United States that never had a book come out of it. But part of Santa's early work was in getting all of the roll call votes in the U.S. Congress computerized. Right.
One thing I guess I wanted to say is that I feel like we were very lucky being there in the 60s and 70s because it was a very informal place. And very, I want to say democratic in a way, that graduate students were treated, they weren't exploited, they were sort of treated as equals, because these men at this point in their career, when we came, were pretty young. They had just published The American Voter. And I remember very clearly meeting Warren and trying to call him Professor Miller, and he said, no, call me Warren, which was very typical of Warren. And it was very typical of
it's also true of Don and Phil.
Right, of the atmosphere at the center. I think, we've grown bigger and better in a lot of different ways, but that early atmosphere is hard to keep going, I think.
Happy 50th birthday to the Center for Political Studies.
Yes, happy birthday.
We were there at the beginning and real happy to still be involved.
I think very few people can say that they've worked at the ISR for 55 years, Michael. Very few people can say they've worked 55 years anywhere. But but it's just been a home, sort of.
Right.